Squall Leonhart was born in the village of Windhill, but his mother Rain would pass away shortly after his birth, where Squall and Rain's adoptive daughter Alone would be sent to Adea's orphanage, where Squall would see Alone as his only friend until Alone would move away, where Squall would distance himself from the orphans around his age. During his time in Blam Garden, Squall would find himself in a rivalry with Cypher, where one day he and Cypher would duel, but would result in Cypher slashing him across the face, leaving him a permanent scar, before Squall would retaliate, giving Cypher a similar scar. After recovering from his injury, Squall would be placed on a team with Zell and Cypher, but during the siege of Dolet, Cypher would abandon his team. After evacuating, Squall would graduate. Now a member of SeeD, Squall and his team would be given their first mission to assist the Force Owls in an attempt to kidnap the Galbian president, but this would fail and they will only be faced off with a fake version of him. When arriving in Timber, Cypher would take the president hostage, where Squall and his team along with Clistus would ambush Cypher, but would escape with the help of Adea. Squall and his team would head to Galbia Garden, where they would be given orders to assassinate the sorceress Adea Kramer with the help of fellow Galbian student Irving Caneas. However, this would fail and Squall would be forced to take Adea head on, but not before fighting Cypher, who was assumed dead until now, where Squall would defeat his rival, where he and his team would fight Adea, but Squall would be defeated by Adea's Ice Strike spell. After escaping the D District prison, Squall's team would be intercepted by a mobile Galbia Garden, where Squall's team would infiltrate Galbia Garden, where they would fight Cypher and Adea. After defeating Adea, Renoa would be left in a comatose state, where Squall would seek out Alone. However, it would be revealed that Renoa was being controlled by Ultimacia, where she would break Adele's seal, where Squall would invade the lunatic Pandora to save Alone. Once again, would fight Cypher, but after this, he would take Renoa hostage, where they would be face off against Ultimacia, who would take over Renoa, but as she used time compression, this will allow Squall and his party to travel to the future and defeat her. As well as the help of Renoa, Squall and his party would travel back home, where Squall and his party would celebrate their victory in peace. Born to Will and Jacqueline Schnee as the eldest sibling in the Schnee family, at some point Winter would join the Atlas military, where she would rise through ranks, eventually becoming a member of the Special Operas unit and a subordinate of General James Ironwood. After the fall of Beacon, Ironwood would call Winter back to Alice, where she would be tasked in keeping watch over the Winter Maiden until her death. Until that day would come, Team RWBY's group would arrive in Atlas after being apprehended by the Aesops, where Ironwood revealed the existence of Salem. During the Battle of Mantle, Winter would be stationed in Atlas Academy, where she would meet with Penny, having been given orders to obtain the power of the Winter Maiden, but they would be attacked by Cinderfall, and despite their efforts, Cinder would gain the upper hand, but would be saved by Penny, who had obtained the power of the Winter Maiden, where she would force Cinder to retreat. Winter later would witness the beginning of Salem's assault on Alice, where she would arrest Yang's team, but after a discussion, she would release Yang's team to rescue Oscar from Monstra, but only under the condition on escaping before they deploy a bomb designed to destroy Monstra. Winter would later join Ironwood outside of Alice Academy, where Emerald, using her semblance, would pose as Penny, but this would all be an ambush for Ironwood, where Winter would assist Team Junior in defeating their now rogue superior. But Ironwood would later find Winter in the vault, but this time Ironwood would defeat her, but not before Penny would transfer her main power to Winter, where Winter would go through a portal to fight Cinder, but Cinder would defeat both John and Weiss before escaping, hang through the portal into Vacuo, Winter would clear out a horror grim where her journey would continue. Well, what's up, Winter, where I'll be pitting a member of SeeD in terms of Squall Leonhart, taking on a member of the Ace Operatives, Winter Schnee. And also, I'd like to thank KingKamron for requesting this match, who also requested me to use Maiden Winter. And to help Squall out a bit, I'll be taking some of his elements that he has shown in the Dissidia games and his showings by the end of Final Fantasy VIII, so none of his elements from the Kingdom Hearts games. Now, with that aside, let us start by comparing and contrasting these two physically. By the end of Final Fantasy VIII, Squall will be a 17-year-old teenager staying around 5'8" in good shape. As far as strength goes, Squall will be pretty decent due to being his team's leader, as well more focusing on speed and strength. After his defeat of Cypher, while he wouldn't be on Cypher's level of fighting without the aid of a team, Squall will be pretty average, and as far as durability goes, while no tank, Squall took a Deus Ice Strike to his shoulder, took a point-blank fire spell by Cypher, as well as slash across face. Stamina-wise, we really don't have a limit, but much like Cypher, Zell, and even Quistis, he's capable of going from fight to fight with short breaks needed. By the end of Volume 8, I'll go out on a limb and say that Winter would probably be in her mid or late 20s, staying around 5'8" when not in heals. Despite her limited showings, she's pretty strong, being able to slam Crow into ground that formed a crater, and Crow on his own traded blows with powerful opponents such as Raven and Tyrion. And Tyrion's own strength broke RWBY's aura with a kick, as well as traded blows with Cinder and Ironwood. Speed-wise, she's fast enough to keep pace with Cinder on 2 different occasions. Durability on the other hand, she's taken hits from Cinder and knocked back by an RNG blast from Ironwood. However, she did dampen the blast with a glyph, so while no glass cannon, I'll go on a limb and say, much like many RWBY characters, she has a good resistance against magic and a decent amount of resistance against physical, being around average for her durability. Okay, I'll give it to you straight. Squall is only a 17-year-old teenager who's nowhere near his prime, while Winter has been her prime for several years, and would also condition herself better for combat. The only advantage that Squall has going for him is a slight speed and strength advantage. However, that really holds any value when you take into account that Winter has faced opponents above her weight class. But with a slight grain of salt, it's clearly evident that during her brief fight with Crow, that he was holding back. The only advantage that Squall has going for him is his magic resistance, mainly due to Winter's injuries being feats that someone like Ironwood or even Blake would be able to walk off. But that really doesn't stop Winter from taking the edge due to being stronger, faster, and being better built for combat. So there's no question that Winter gets the edge in physical capabilities. Before going to the weapons, I'd like to make this clear, and to help Squall out since each gunblade dictates what line breaker he has, I'll be granting Squall his ultimate weapon. So with that aside, let's continue. Squall carried only one weapon, dubbed the Leonhart gunblade. Due to the blade's design, the gunblade is designed to do a power blows without having to overexert the user. A unique function that the blade has is the ability to send out a shockwave through the blade itself by pressing the trigger mechanism, as mentioned, to apply more damage without having to use too much upper body strength. Winter has only one weapon, and that's her customized rapier. Due to its design, it seems to be more made for slashing rather than piercing blows, unlike most rapiers. The handle has a switch to allow her to equip an extra rapier, unlike her primary sword, is made for fencing and slashing. I think this category pretty much speaks for itself. Winter is simply carrying rapier swords, unlike Weiss, doesn't utilize and dust to enhance her strikes. While Squall, on the other hand, his gunblade allows him to enhance his strikes for every time he presses a trigger. Sure, Winter's swords may have better range, but Squall, without having to apply much force, can enhance his strikes for every time by simply pressing a trigger. So there's no question that Squall gets the edge in weapons. Due to how limited Squall is in terms of magic, and honestly to make this fight more fair, I'll only be limiting Winter and Squall to only 2 summons each. So with that out of the way, let's continue. What makes Squall such a tough character to break down in terms of magic is due to the standards of Final Fantasy VIII, since all magic is dictated by the draw junction. The draw junction allows a character to draw a quantity of ores from an opponent to gain a certain spell instead of learning the spell themselves. But according to the Dissidia games, Squall uses lightning magic that he can use to pull an enemy towards them. And due to him being assigned the Leonhart gunblade, Squall has several limit breakers, dubbed Rizuku-ken, which delivers a flurry of power strikes, which can be followed by neither one of his limit breakers. That consists from his weakest of them, is dubbed the Rogue Divide, that is a diagonal upward slash. The phase circle allows him to spin in a circular motion before sending a shockwave that damages all opponents in his range. Blasting Zone gathers up energy in the blade before slamming it down to deal fatal damage to all enemies. And finally, the Leonhart strike delivers a total of 17 devastating strikes. That will be followed up by a powerful slash. However, one of the biggest weaknesses is that without a spell known as Aura, Squall can't bring out his limit breakers when he wants to, and can only activate them when he's near defeat. And for summons that I use in my playthrough, I'll be giving him Diablos that gathers up dark energy to take out all enemies in his range, and Quetzalcoatl, a bird that wipes out all enemies with devastating lightning bolts. Winter has a small yet effective set of magic that she uses to get by. Just like all huntresses, she has her aura and semblance. Aura is the manifestation of one's soul to buff their strength, heal them, or dampen damage. Her semblance are her glyphs that she mainly uses to boost her jumping speed, fire icicles, or use them as shields. However, she has only one showing of combining dust with her glyphs, which is her gravity dust that allows her to jump to higher ledges. She has 2 summons, which I'll be giving her Beowulf and Swarm of Small Nevermores. After being given the Winter Maid's powers, Winter was given the ability to use elemental magic, but her only showings of using the Winter Maid's abilities is the use of flight, ice, wind, and electricity magic. This category is a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, if given the right chance, Squall would be able to take out Winter with his limit breakers, whether it's the Leonhart strike or the Blasting Zone. But the problem with this is that Squall has been near defeat, leaving him with his summons and lightning magic. And I don't think I'll find anyone who would debate that Winter's summons would stack up to Squall's. If he pulls off his summons, Winter is fucked, and her only option is to either run or go out trying. But again, these come with their flaws, since Squall's limit breakers are completely random. He either gets his follow-up or doesn't. His summons again are a mixed bag, but for my playthrough, the summons I am more leveled up, the faster Squall would be able to break out his Guardian Forces. However, Squall still has to leave himself vulnerable for a small amount of time. Winter's glyphs are a bit similar to a fight, except her glyphs allows her to jump great distances or block attacks. But to break this tie, what really comes down to is whose magic is overall more flexible, and how well it aids them in combat. And when it comes down to that, I'll say that Winter is overall better when it comes to magic, since in order for Squall to put his limit breakers to any use, his limit breakers involves his opponents being on the ground. And this is something that Winter would likely capitalize on. She can jump larger distances with her glyphs, or block Squall's magic, or even better, fly away from his range. Their elemental magic is honestly no debate. Sure, Squall may be able to pull Winter in using his lightning magic, but he's ultimately outclassed due to Winter having a better selection, and her aura being able to dampen most of the damage, on top of being able to heal her. So at the end of the day, Winter gets the edge in magic. Just like all of my previous fights involving characters that use weapons, I'll be using Star Wars Lightsaber Fine Forms to better analyze and illustrate a combatant's approach to combat. During his time to become a member of SeeD, Squall would train himself to be the spear tip of his team's offense. After his defeat at the hands of Cypher, who trained himself to fight without the aid of a team, Squall would primarily be a power duelist, so there's no question that Squall would be trained in Form 1 Shisho and Form 5 Genso. Shisho trains a user to deal with groups of opponents using wide sweeping strikes. However, the form could be easily countered by a well-trained opponent, while Form 5 Genso is built around blocking before countering with a devastating assault. As combatant, Squall takes a straightforward power offense in a blade-to-blade combat to apply a fast yet swift power-based offense, but if this fails, his only option is to outduel his opponent or apply his spells if needed. Despite having a straightforward offense, Squall has shown that he can make it work. The only flaw is that Squall is still pretty young and still has a lot to learn. As the eldest Schnee who would go on to train Weiss, Winter would be proficient in Form 2 Makashi. Makashi trains a user for blade-on-blade combat. However, the form does lack power behind its strikes. Now, I did think about giving Winter Form 4 Taru, but unlike Weiss, Winter has potential to form, but to me at least, she mainly seems to be more focused in blade-on-blade combat, rather than using acrobatics like Weiss would. And before I go into Winter as a combatant, keep in mind she has only about 3 on-screen fights, and I really don't have a lot to go off of, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. As a combatant, Winter applies a swift offense to exploit openings to her advantage, but if this fails, then she applies some acrobatics or more power into her strikes, and only falls back on her magic when needed. However, opponents who can apply a stronger offense or can cope with her fighting style can get around this. I'm pretty sure this is pretty clear cut. Winter without doubt is a talented combatant, but her fighting style is just a bit too straightforward, since a rush style fighter like Cinder was able to get around and even get the upper hand on her, and Crow, who utilizes in Shisho, was able to cope with Winter's fighting style, while Squall on the other hand would fix Shisho's weaknesses with Form 5. What's even worse for Winter is that Squall has already faced someone who studied in Makashi in terms of Cypher. While Winter would be a better user in Makashi than Cypher due to having more experience, however, due to Squall balancing out his style by building himself in both speed and strength, and I'm under no circumstances saying that Winter is a bad fighter. Her fighting style would give Squall difficulties, since she has about a decade of experience on Squall, as I just mentioned, is a better user of Makashis than Cypher. So, how is a skill learning combatant like Squall better than Winter? It's actually pretty simple, really. It's true that Winter is a better user of Makashi, but after Squall's defeat against Cypher, Squall would take it upon himself to fix his previous fighting style, and is arguably a better swordsman than Cypher. So while Winter would hold her own against Squall, Squall on the other hand has honed his skills and built himself to cope with swift swordsmen like Cypher. So I give the very slight edge to Squall in combat skills and tactics. Let's just say through connection with Blam Garden and Atlas Kami, SeeD and Ironwoods set up a tournament to challenge their best fighters, with Squall and Winter being their first combatants. Squall draws his Leonhart gunblade, while Winter draws her rapier as the round begins. The two rush forward trading blows, with Squall managing to deflect the majority of Winter's attacks, while the superior is finding herself on defense. His final strike almost knocking her rapier out of her hand, with a powered up strike from the trigger. Winter deciding to take it up a notch, but as Winter closes distance, Squall sends out a line of lightning, pulling the man close as she's hit by a flurry of power strikes that sends her into a wall. Winter rebounds, taking only minor damage. You're good, but you still have a lot to learn. Using Glyph to dash up to Squall, who's clotheslined into a wall, it is taken aback by the amplified speed. Quickly rebounding, Squall parries an assault from the maiden and counters with a barrage of power strikes and by the shockwaves through the blade. However, Winter takes a moment to realize that the boy's fighting style hasn't changed. Squall charges forward, but Winter decides to run Squall to test, quoting her secondary sword that catches Squall off guard. The maiden allows Squall to get close before sending him skating back with a wind blast. Using another glyph, summons a Beowulf. Squall is anything but surprised as he's flanked from both sides. Now Squall turns to find himself on the defense as Winter lands a number of quick cuts and slashes on Squall by slipping through his guard. However, the mercenary parries one of Winter's strikes before striking the Beowulf with several sleeping strikes as it's hit by an onslaught of power strikes and shockwaves, with the final strike slicing in two. Winter was only testing Squall, but now it's time to take it up a notch. The maiden flies at Squall with high speeds as he's taken back, but goes to block, but Squall is struck with such high speeds that he's sent flying back several feet. The two re-enter with intense blade lock. As the two break away, Squall sends out another line of lightning. Little does Squall know, she was expecting this, and in turn parries with a circular strike, followed by a quick combo before kicking off of him that sends him staggering, and follows this up with an ice beam. The two take a moment to rest. Winter reattaches her rapier to her sword. This is gonna end well for you. I suggest you surrender. No, I still have plenty fight left in me, Squall states as he stumbles to his feet. As the two rush at each other, but this time Squall activates his Ryukuken Limebreaker, hitting Winter with a total of 5 strikes before following up with the Fade Circle, sending Winter flying into a wall, breaking her shoulder and cracking several ribs, making her aura flicker. By now, Squall may have been able to hold off Winter's assault, but now he's starting to feel the exhaustion catching up to him. Squall's sprint has now been reduced to jog as Winter stabs her sword into the ground as a swarm of small Nevermores fly into Squall, who can only hold his blade in defensive stance. But as they disperse, Winter releases her rapier, blasting Squall with an ice beam, not once, but twice. Squall drops his knees, admitting defeat, and with that, I declare Winter Schnee, the Winter Maiden, the winner. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, despite Squall easily being number 3 of my all-time favorite Final Fantasy characters, I knew that Squall wasn't going to win, but I genuinely was surprised at how well he held his own. As a matter of fact, Squall could win, and it all comes down to his magic. If his Limebreakers were anything like Final Fantasy VII Limebreakers, then Squall would win, since he could just break out his Limebreakers over and over again. Sure, one would argue that once Winter is hit by it once, she wouldn't fall for it again, and that is true, but then again, Squall's follow-up attack is completely random, and through my personal playthrough, most of the time I mainly got the Leonhart strike and the Fate Circle, giving Squall a 50-50 chance at getting one of those. Physically, it's no contest, but this is mainly due to Squall's limited showings of actual feats, and in terms of physical abilities, I really don't think that Squall would scale to Cypher. Weapons is basically a similar comparison of Genesis Rapier versus Cloudstride's Buster Sword. Just switch the characters and weapons. Magic this time around was pretty messy category. since you really have to give Squall the shadow of the doubt that he will be able to pull off a summon. But honestly, I believe that Winter would be able to have an easier time to summon than Squall if given the chance. Their magic usage is no debate. Winter has more variety and with better range. As mentioned in their breakdown, without a spell known as Aura, Squall can't break out his limit breakers when he wants to, and Winter has 2 counters to Squall limit breakers. She can dodge or block it with a glyph, or even better, fly away from its range. Combat skills was pretty surprising this time around, since I was expecting Winter to take this category due to having more experience. Now that would be the case if Winter were to fix Makashi's weakness. But to be brief, and despite Winter being better built for combat, Squall on the other hand has better built himself for his combative approach. And his fighting style, in short, is basically a similar reason why Cloud lost due to, even by the end of Final Fantasy VII, he still wouldn't be on par with Zack. So how does this tie into that fight? It's pretty simple. Squall, much like Cloud, built himself to be the spear tip of his team's offense in a power-based approach. The only difference is that Squall mainly built himself for both strength and speed by the time of his defeat with Cypher. However, to give my man Squall credit where credit is due, if he were to fight Winter before she obtains the power of the Winter Maiden, then I could see Squall walking away. He doesn't need to outduel her, he just needs to hit her with his limit breakers by the right time once he's near his limit. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But with that said, I'm Winter Ghost. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter if you care about that, and I'll see you all next time.
What the fuck? Open it. Bucky? Who the hell is Bucky?